This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, Carmen CJ, Runescribble, Papa Podo, and Blooddown, and brought to you by Papa Podo, who requested this topic. If there is a video you want me to make, just head over to Patreon and become a channel member, and select the Pickled Producer tier, since among other benefits, you'll get to make a video request every month, be it the continuation of an existing series or a brand new story. Now, before we get into today's story, I just want to ask you to do me a favor. Hit that like button since it tells YouTube you enjoy what I do, and check whether you're subscribed, since only about a quarter of my viewers are, and it's a free way to keep up to date with all my content. In return, I'll do all I can to keep making regular quality content for you. Thanks, and let's hop in. It is a dark and stormy night on Scrapnik Island, though this does not stop Amy Rose from appearing via warp point, her quills and dress whipping in the intense winds off the sea. As ever, the Scrapniks outside are quick to greet her, with Sigma and Mecha guiding her into the island's underground depths and out of the elements. Thanking them for their hospitality, the Pink Hedgehog relays her message, before questioning where Metal and Emerald are, since she also wishes to speak with them. Helpfully, Mecha states that his brother and nephew were last seen going through the old Death Egg databanks, since apparently the security systems were running sluggishly, and Metal wanted to clear up some memory. Sighing fondly that the blue bot never stops when it comes to watching for danger, Amy heads down to the area Mecha had suggested, where as promised, Metal and Emerald are hard at work. At the sight of his Auntie Amy, the Gizoid beams. While turning his green optics upon her, Metal greets his old friend and questions if she has come to help. Shaking her head, Amy explains that she actually came to invite them to go trick-or-treating with her, Sonic, and the others, since it's almost Halloween, and she thought they might enjoy a break. Such a thought clearly excites Emerald, though when he looks to his dad, the fastest machine in existence replies that while the Gizoid is more than free to go, he is afraid that he cannot attend, since he has far too much work to do after his recent absences. Respecting this, Amy states that he's still got a few days to change his mind, though when his resultant expression reminds her that the blue bot is as stubborn as his template, she instead pivots to Emerald, suggesting they go coordinate elsewhere since they don't want to disturb Metal. Figuring this is for the best, Emerald follows the Pink Hedgehog out of the room. While continuing where he left off, Metal reconnects himself to Scrapnik Island's internal data systems and resumes searching for software that could be offloaded without damaging the infrastructural core systems of the island. After a minute, he comes across one that does not seem to have any connection to the functioning of the old Death Egg, a program called Sonic.EXE. Curious what this could be, the blue bot begins examining the file more closely, discovering that its creation date places it between the initial fall of the Death Egg while he was still out of operation and the Angel Island incident, the logical conclusion being that it has something to do with Eggman's scheme to relaunch the space station, though why such a program would be called Sonic.EXE still eludes him. Figuring the quickest way to answer this question is to run the program, Metal initiates it, so that a second later, he is in what appears to be Green Hill. Fascinating. At first, everything seems normal, albeit utterly deserted, with Metal racing around Sonic's old stomping ground and quickly coming to see why his doppelganger keeps coming back here, since the terrain is almost perfectly optimized for building up speed and momentum. However, not everything can be fun in games, as eventually he does come across a figure who his senses recognize as Sonic, though visual data is only a 97% match, as this hedgehog has yellowed pointed teeth and pitch black sclera housing glowing red irises that burn with hate. Truthfully, Metal isn't sure if he should be flattered or enraged that his creator modeled this digital version of Sonic on him, even if he is lacking a jet engine. Though recognizing neither form of vanity will help him solve the mystery of this program, the blue bot instead steps forth and greets the entity, who he supposes should be called Sonic.EXE, flatly questioning what his function is, as he attempts to use administrator permissions to force the program to comply. However, it does not. Instead, Sonic.EXE only grins, for asking in a deep distorted voice whether Metal would like to play with him. Shaking his head, the blue bot replies that he has no time for such things, for once more attempting an override, though, like with his previous attempt, Sonic.EXE is unaffected, as his grin turns into a glare, while all around him, the environment shifts, as the idyllic blue sky becomes a pulsating void of reds and blacks, and the foliage withers and dies. Having seen enough, Metal now attempts to end the program, though here too he is powerless, as EXE cackles that the android is not allowed to leave until they've played their game, and he's taken his soul. Adopting a fighting stance, Metal dares the malware to try. Then, as EXE's grin grows beyond reason into something truly grotesque, the blue bot launches himself forward, his fist raised. However, before he can land a hit, the sinister program is gone, reappearing directly above him as he strikes him in the back, only to vanish once more when Metal tries to retaliate. This quickly becomes a pattern, as no matter how hard the heroic android tries, he cannot land a single blow on EXE, who takes sadistic pleasure in slowly injuring his foe, all the while forcing him to confront how truly helpless he is. Finally, though, he decides to put Metal out of his misery, knocking him to the ground and standing over him as he leers the bot was too slow. Oh well, maybe his next victim will be more fun. Then, with a laugh of purest evil, he plunges a hand into the blue bot's chest, terminating him. With this, the program ends, returning a rather shaken Metal to his own body within the bowels of Scrapnik Island. Though refusing to let himself be flustered, he defaults to logic, concluding that EXE must have been the version of Sonic that Eggman presented to Knuckles in order to trick him into helping him. No wonder such a foe would be so malefic and unbeatable in his own program. However, that is all he is, the ghost of an old scheme relegated to the confines of a long-forgotten file, and one Metal feels no guilt for deleting, as it will free up space in the island's computer. And for a time, that is the last thought Metal spares for Sonic.EXE, as he continues his work late into the night, though remembering his brother's advice from when they first began excavating the tunnels and wanting to model proper protocol for Emerald, he ultimately decides to call a halt to work for the day, as to not overexert himself, and instead powers down with plans to finish in the morning. Though, strangely, instead of reactivating on Scrapnik Island, when his senses flare to life, he is on Angel Island, specifically the forested area near the beach, and more surprisingly, Tails is also present. Wanting to reach the bottom of this bizarre phenomenon, Metal attempts to question the young fox on why they are here, though despite activating his auditory circuits, no sound comes out. Instead, he feels his body moving without his volition, while a look of horror crosses Tails' face as he begins to run. Growing slightly desperate now, Metal attempts to regain control of his body, though, like his time trapped within the Metal Commander, this is no use as he slowly closes in on Tails. Then, when he is almost on top of the fox boy, he hears himself chastise him for being too slow, though the voice that says this is not his own, but instead the cruel cadence of EXE. A moment later, Metal feels his body collide with Tails, pinning the yellow youth to the ground. While raising a hand, he plunges it into the fox's chest, ending his life, just as his own was taken within the program. Suddenly, Metal's sensory inputs all cut out, leaving him in limbo for a second as they reboot. Though, when they do, he finds himself back on Scrapnik Island, in the exact place he initially powered down. From the looks of things, nothing has changed, with there being no sign of the violent acts he witnessed his body commit. Checking his internal diagnostics, he sees nothing to suggest that his period of inactivity was interrupted, with this indicating that as strange as it may be, what he experienced was nothing more than the organic concept of a dream. Making a mental note to ask Mecha or Sigma if they've ever experienced anything like this before, Metal gets back to work with Emerald by his side, though once again they are interrupted by a guest, as a few hours later, Mecha alerts the pair to the arrival of the tornado in their airspace, with father and son returning to the surface to greet their friends. Or rather, friend singular, as when the plane touches down, everyone is surprised to see Sonic is the pilot despite this usually being Tails' job. Unable to shake a sudden sinking feeling, even if it is illogical, Metal makes his way over to Sonic and questions what he's doing here, to which the blue blur replies that Amy told him Metalhead could use some help with his data clearing job, so he came to lend a hand. After all, who can speed through all those files quicker than him? Resisting the playful urge to assert that he could, Metal instead thanks the hedgehog for the help, before questioning why Tails did not accompany him, considering he is both the usual pilot of the tornado, and data management would be more his area of expertise. Casually, Sonic replies that he wasn't around this morning, so he decided to come alone, with this only intensifying Metal's concern, as he asks whether his template knows where the fox is. Looking away as if deep in thought, the blue blur admits that he doesn't, and that he hasn't seen his buddy since yesterday, but he's sure they can handle this without him. To this end, Sonic races Emerald back inside, though in that moment, Metal isn't much in the mood for play, following the others at a subdued pace, and not really engaging in any of their banter, as his mind is squarely on the location of Tails. Surely, it must be a coincidence that the fox is unavailable today, since there are countless other things he could be doing, though in spite of this rationalization, his mind cannot help but keep returning to the image from his dream of Tails maimed and dead beneath him. Thanks to Sonic's help, the two androids are able to finish the job today, though it does still take well into the night, as while Eggman is a genius, he is also a file hoarder, making this process much more laborious and time-consuming than it needed to be. Nonetheless, Metal does feel a sense of satisfaction as he powers down that evening, having almost forgotten his lingering dread. However, this is promptly brought back to the surface when he finds himself not in his home, but instead on a metal walkway that is almost pitch black, aside from the flashes of lightning that illuminate a blood-red sky. Like last time, he is not alone, as now Knuckles stands before him, face twisted in a furious scowl, as instead of running, the Echidna warrior tries to fight much like Metal himself did. However, just like when he fought Metal, EXE maneuvers the blue bot's body so he cannot be hit, seemingly implementing something like chaos control to vanish and reappear every time Knuckles tries to strike. Nonetheless, the Red Guardian does not falter, putting everything he has into his attacks, though this quickly proves taxing, as after repeated failures, Knuckles begins to flag, until eventually he trips over his own feet. This is precisely what EXE had been waiting for, as striding forward, Metal feels his own foot slam into the Echidna's chin, flipping him onto his back and exposing his belly to a fatal overhead hammer blow. With a jolt, the Bluebot finds himself on Scrapnik Island again, and wasting no time, he immediately makes for the warp point, determined to see Knuckles with his own optics and prove that what he just experienced was a dream, nothing more. Though he does not know what has gotten him so agitated, Emerald joins his dad on this quest, accompanying him to Angel Island, and taking flight so they can cover more ground in their search for Knuckles. However, even with two sets of eyes, they can find neither hide nor hair of the Echidna warrior, with Metal personally scouring every part of Angel Island twice over. Even Sky Sanctuary is deserted, with the Bluebot noting that the Master Emerald is likewise gone, possibly stolen by EXE to make use of his body's unique requirement to go super, or at least, that would be the case if his dreams were real, a fact Metal even now tries desperately to refute, despite the mounting evidence to the contrary. In fact, the only thing to suggest that what Metal keeps seeing didn't happen is the state of the forested area near the beach, since when the robot investigates it, he finds no trace of Tails' body. Admittedly, this does not prove anything when dealing with a sly operator like EXE, though at least it allows Metal to hold out hope, as if he'd seen a pattern of blood or the young fox's corpse, he would have had no choice but to accept his fears. By now, night has well and truly fallen, though while Metal feels the best course of action is to return to Scrapnik Island and use their resources to expand their search radius, Emerald states that he'll catch up with his dad, as he wants to check in on Auntie Amy since Station Square is nearby, but if it's worth anything, he'll keep an eye out for Knuckles while he's there, since maybe he just went into the city for the day. Truthfully, Metal considers this about as probable as Eggman deciding to give up his life of evil to become a small-town toy maker, though recognizing that his son wishes to visit Amy, he does not deny him, returning home alone, where he attempts to work through the night on tracking Knuckles or Tails, having come to fear what happens when he powers down. However, it seems Sigma has other ideas, as shortly before dawn he stops in to suggest that his brother rest, as it would be illogical to overextend himself and invalidate his search results. Briefly, Metal considers telling Sigma about his worries, as if anyone would be empathetic, it's the E-Series, though that would mean adding yet another burden to his already considerable load as the leader of Scrapnik Island over something that may or may not be real, so for now, he will handle this alone. However, recognizing the truth of Sigma's words, he does agree to retire, finding a space deep within the bowels of the island to power down, since hopefully he will be far enough away from everyone that EXE can do no harm. How wrong he is, as when he next awakens, it is in an unfamiliar building, though one part of this nightmarish process is quite familiar, the presence of a known entity who EXE is no doubt marked as his next victim, and this time, it is Emerald. Seeing that it is his son who is in danger, Metal puts everything he has into trying to restrain his body even a little so that the young Gizoid can flee, though it is a vain effort, as EXE has complete control by now, lifting off the ground and flying after Emerald. Even still, Metal does not give up, attempting to access any system, any small part of himself the evil program had not thought to lock him out of, anything at all that can help his son. However, there is nothing, and Metal is forced to watch as his body corners Emerald. Then, in a grotesque use of the Metal Commander's shape-shifting abilities, he manifests a massive maw of jagged teeth and consumes the terrified Gizoid whole. An instant later, Metal is back home, and while his internal chronometer registers as early evening, his auditory processor still rings with Emerald's final terrified scream, as though he is still standing in that awful, unfamiliar room. With this sound also comes a grief worse than anything the Bluebot has ever felt before, and a pure, unfiltered terror, as he needs to know whether what he saw was dream or reality, and he needs to know now. Wasting no time, Metal activates his common radio's emerald, urging him to respond, though this is met with silence. Growing tenser by the second, Metal repeats the message, demanding now that his son tell him if he's okay, his vocal unit shaking slightly as he makes this plea. However, he once again receives no reply. Thinking fast, Metal next tries to use his Chaos Emerald radar, figuring that will help him pinpoint Emerald's position, though, like his comms, the radar picks up nothing. This is odd, since even if Emerald were injured or killed, the emeralds would still exist and be traceable. That is, unless they were in the one place Metal's radar never looks, inside himself. That is the only logical answer for their complete absence from the world. Not to mention Emerald's radio silence, as Metal knows the Gizoid would not willfully ignore his calls. This is at last the irrefutable proof the Bluebot needs to accept that his programming has been infected with the virus of Sonic.EXE. A grim thought, as it reminds him of his time as a captive of the Metal Commander. However, like with the Commander, his solution is the same. If he cannot purge the malefic malware, then he will self-destruct, as termination is preferable to allowing a monster to use his body to hurt and kill his friends and family. Seeing no reason to delay what must be done, and knowing that his brothers will attempt to talk him out of it, Metal begins removing his internal safeguards, trusting in his power to quickly cause an overload if left unchecked, as if he must face the end, he would rather it be brief and relatively painless. For a moment, the Bluebot considers the irony that he will die inside the Death Egg just as his creator intended for him, and the fact that Eggman will never know he got his wish. Though, at least to the Doctor's credit, his engineering is sufficiently robust that Metal's termination will not damage the integrity of the island or even this room, so at least he is not leaving his brothers with more cleanup after everything they had to do to rebuild from the sacking of Scrapnik Island. Not wanting his final thoughts to be of painful memories or Dr. Eggman, Metal instead thinks back on the time he spent with his friends, his brothers, and even Emerald, with his fondness for them almost making him believe that he can see them all standing around him. Though, as he will learn momentarily, this is no vision, as a second later, they all jump out and cheer, "Surprise!" Unable to comprehend what he is seeing, Metal ends his termination sequence and looks around in bewilderment, seeing the faces of Sonic and Amy, Scrap, Sigma, and Mecha, and most shockingly of all, his trio of victims, Tails, Knuckles, and Emerald. Spotting this confusion, though not fully understanding its root, Amy bounds over to beam that since Metal didn't feel like coming out to spend Halloween with them, they all decide to bring Halloween to him, so she hopes he likes it. Unfortunately for Amy, this is not met with the delight or even appreciation she'd been anticipating, as seeing that shock, confusion, and horror have not left the Bluebot's face. Her ears droop and she begins to apologize, saying that if this isn't what he wants, they can go. She just thought he might enjoy a chance to experience the holiday with them. Placing a metallic hand on his friend's shoulder, Metal refutes that she has nothing to apologize for, and that the error was committed by him, finally opening up about his recent experiences now that the presence of his presumed victims has cleared away the crushing fear and paranoia that drove him into such a state of irrationality. However, instead of judging him for this, his friends and family leap to offer their support, with the Scrapniks apologizing for not noticing their brother was in pain, while Sonic quips that he can see why an evil version of him would be scary, so he doesn't blame Metalhead for getting jumpy. As for Tails, Knuckles, and Emerald, they rush to explain their absences and put the android's mind at ease, revealing that Amy recruited each of them for a specific party prep job, with Tails having been on AV while Knuckles did most of the heavy lifting, and Emerald provided all-around help, since he was just as eager as Amy to make this party a hit for his dad. In fact, it was even his idea to have Knuckles use the Master Emerald to mask his Chaos Energy signature so Metal wouldn't track them and stumble upon the party prematurely. As for Amy, she provides the crucial insight, using her high emotional intelligence to posit why this experience was so distressing for Metal, suggesting that it might link back to his time as the Metal Commander, with his internal systems interpreting the loss to EXE and the program as the same kind of threat to his bodily autonomy, and attempting to run calculations on the worst-case scenarios, which were then brought to the forefront by his fear, creating a faulty logic loop where his mind could not distinguish between failing to stop a threat and being responsible for the pain and damage that enemy would inflict, since in the case of the Commander, one caused the other, even if none of them blame him for it. Sighing deeply, Metal admits that it doesn't matter if they hold him responsible for that. He does, which makes her assessment logical, if embarrassing that he could fall victim to his own faulty code. Smiling softly, Amy tells him not to take it too hard, while Sonic grins that she's right. Those sort of screw-ups are part of being his own person, a bot. What matters is not dwelling on him, especially when right now he has a room full of pals who want to celebrate with him. Nodding, Metal concurs that he can reflect later. For now, he wishes to enjoy the party with his friends and experience this Halloween for himself. And that's where we'll leave our Halloween special. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.